Okay, so I think paper proposal is due tonight, right?
Yeah.
Anybody have any questions about anything?
Same goes for this class as Brit-Lit. Do we not have a response paper this week?
No response paper this week, yep.
Okay.
Yep, you'll just, essentially, I'll spend tomorrow grading grading and commenting on the paper proposals. You should get those back by tomorrow evening, and then just work on the paper. Yep. I will also have a set of sample exam questions for you on Wednesday. I don't have them for you today, but yeah, you will get those.
And the midterm is next Monday or next Wednesday?
Next Wednesday.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, I have
Yeah.
one for cognitive psychology too.
Yeah, well, you've got one in the morning also for Brit-Lit too. Yeah, I mean things just kind of shake out that way. You know, I think midterm grades are due on Friday. So
Definitely gonna have
yeah,
big change of gears because I'm thinking about how the brain works and how memory systems work to switching over to.
so you have elves and shit. Yeah.
Yeah, both sides of the spectrum.
Psychology, elves. Yeah, it's it's.
Yeah, it'll be an
Yeah.
interesting day.
All right. Okay, so does anybody have any questions about upcoming assignments at all?
I just want to clarify this one more time.
Go for it.
All right, I take a response paper I've already written.
Uh-huh.
And I take what I've already written and then answer questions further down the paper, and that'll be it. As long as it's 1,000 words, that'll count. Yes?
Yeah.
Is that all? Or
Yeah, 1,500 words is the.
So I don't have to write a whole another paper. I can just take what I've already written and expand.
Yeah, and you can expand on that. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. You don't have to start from scratch.
Awesome.
Anything else? All right. Great. Then let's get into this dark and tragic tale of the first age of Middle Earth. How's this going for you?
Tudor's mom sucks.
Okay. Explain.
Like-
What do you mean by she sucks?
She's just not very she's very cold and unfeeling. Like his,
Uh-huh.
I don't know how far everyone else is read, but like his sister dies and she's like, sorry dude,
Uh-huh.
oh well. Like she's not particularly happy about her children being born or being
Uh-huh.
married. She's very stoic.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good word for it, right? Is it necessarily that she's unfeeling, or is it that she's undemonstrative?
She's undemonstrative.
Yeah, I think, stoic is probably a good way to frame this. Let's look at the way Morwen and Hurin are each kind of individually described here. Like the first two pages, right? Galdor and Hareth had two sons, Hurin and Huor. Hurin was by 3 years the elder, but he was shorter in stature than other men of his kin. In this he took after his mother's people, but in all else he was like Hador, his grandfather, strong in body and fiery of mood. But the fire in him burned steadily, and he had great endurance of will. Of all the men of the north, he knew the most of the counsel of the Noldor. So we have, right, Hurin described as fiery, right? Now then on the next page, Hurin wedded Morwen, the daughter of Baragun, son of Bregalus of the house of Beor, and she was thus of close kin to Beren one hand, so tying this to the other great tales, right? Just as actually Hurin being Huor's brother, Huor is Tuor's father, so it's tied to the tale of the fall of Gondolin as well in a variety of ways. Morwen was dark-haired and tall, and for the light of her glance and the beauty of her face, men called her Eledwen, the Elven Fair. But she was somewhat stern of mood and proud. The sorrows of the house of Beor saddened her heart, for she came as an exile to Dor-lómin from Dorthonion after the ruin of Bragalach. So, Morwen, as opposed to her husband, is stern and proud of mood.
should be like, especially
Sure.
in a story,
Uh-huh.
a dark story. She's,
Yeah.
you know, you never really see her as comforting to her child or
Uh-huh.
her children. You don't see her playing with them or
Right.
even expressing any emotion towards them.
Uh-huh.
Whereas Hurin's like, I'm proud of them. You know,
Uh-huh.
those are good kids.
I think we might also want to pay attention here to the difference in status here between the parents as well. Even though they're both from noble houses, right?
She's a refugee.
Yeah, Morwen is already a refugee, right? Her people have already been destroyed. And she's married into this other group, right? So she is already a refugee and an exile. And I think that there is, at least to a certain extent, a great deal of sympathy in Tolkien's work for those whose lives and homes have been torn up by war. So, you know, I hesitate to say that the novel really kind of like intends to condemn Morwen for her attitude towards her children, but I think that her status as refugee kind of explains some of it, right? This is somebody who's already lost everything.
And I shouldn't have said she sucks. I just should have said it struck me because, you know, she's a refugee. She's already lost so much.
Yeah, and by the end of the second chapter, she's also lost a child.
Yep.
And as far as she knows, is a widow, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, this is someone who, you know, fate just keeps taking things away from her.
And on that same note, you think she would appreciate, like be more appreciative of what she does have. Her people aren't completely dead. They live on in her children.
Right.
And yes, she loses a child, but she still has one other and is expecting another.
Yeah.
Like, yes, this is terrible. Grieve and mourn the loss of your child, but at the same time, you have one that's still alive and one on the way. That they're going to need their mother.
Sure. I think there's a worldview at work here that helps to express some of what seems to us to be a little bit off in Morwen, right? We know, for example, at various points that she internally feels loss. Like, you know, when she has to send Turin away to Doriath, you know, he looks back. Let's see, where is it? It's where it's the so-called first sorrow, the first of the sorrows of Turin, page 75, right? Now Turin was made ready for the journey, and he bade farewell to his mother, and departed in secret with his two companions. But when they bade Turin turn and look back upon the house of his father, then the anguish of parting smote him like a sword, and he cried, Morwen, Morwen, when shall I see you again? But Morwen, standing on her threshold, heard the echo of that cry in the wooded hills, and she clutched the post of the door so that her fingers were torn. So it's clear that she actually does feel emotion very, very deeply, right? As is often the case with people who are not particularly demonstrative emotionally. But I think, yeah, there's a kind of fatalism about her that she just kind of expects, right? Loss and pain as part of the lot of human existence. Whereas her husband tends to be a bit more hopeful and optimistic, right? Right. Hurin always seems to believe that there is a way to win. Morwen seems more concerned with survival and rolling with the things that come, right? So, how do both of these principles then end up kind of being expressed in their son?
Hurin, I mean, he's as strong and fiery as a fighter as his father, but he also has his mother's mood. He's very stoic.
Okay.
He's not demonstrative.
Yeah, he can be hasty, right? In fact, many of his actions are ill-considered. But, yeah, he's silent and brooding, right? Right, as far as fantasy heroes go, he doesn't really fall. It's hard to say that he falls really on the likable side, right? I can see you're looking for something.
Yeah, I was looking for how they described Hurin.
Like as a boy?
Yeah. I was trying to remember where it was.
The first couple of chapters are really more concerned with the parents. I think you're looking for page 39 here. It says, but Hurin was loved less than she. He was dark-haired as his mother, and promised to be like her in mood also, for he was not married, and spoke little, though he learned to speak early, and ever seemed older than his years. Hurin was slow to forget injustice or mockery, but the fire of his father was also in him, and he could be sudden and fierce. Yet he was quick to pity, and the hurts or sadness of living things might move him to tears. And he was like his father in this also, for Morwen was stern with others as with herself. He loved his mother, for her speech to him was forthright and plain. But his father he saw little, for Hurin was often long away from home with the host of Fingon that guarded Hithlum's eastern borders, and when he returned, his quick speech, full of strange words and jests and half-meanings, bewildered Hurin and made him uneasy. So he seems to regard himself as more of his mother's son, right? In large part because father is usually absent. Right, he simply doesn't see much of Hurin. Now I think probably the most important element of this description is Hurin was slow to forget injustice or mockery. So we've got a guy here who holds grudges, right? And grudges are associated not only with the idea of vengeance, but also with the notion of long memory, right? I remember this is one of my father's own defining characteristics. My dad could hold a grudge like a champion for real and imagined slights. So, the reason I point this out is that I think that time and memory are actually a really important element of the narrative here, right? Not only when we talk about differences between men and elves, right? Their different experience of time. But also, given how little men in the story seem to remember of their history, right? Yeah, go ahead.
On 36, when Hurin and Ur are in Godwin, and Turgia wants to keep them, Lord, we are but mortal men, and unlike the Eldar, they may endure for long years awaiting battle with their enemies in some far distant day. But for us, the time is short, and our hope and strength soon wither. Yeah. This is kind of the first expression of that attitude, right?
right? That elves have all the time in the world to wait patiently to muster their forces and to play the long game, right? And in fact, if we look at the way the elf lords primarily behave in the narrative, right? For example, Thingol in his kingdom of Doriath. Does Thingol defend his own borders or go out to confront Morgoth? Yeah, well, because he's concerned with protecting his own kingdom, right?
Yeah.
And we've seen similar things with Turgon, right? Turgon, in the fall of Gondolin, would not send his soldiers out to assault Melko, who is now Morgoth here, right? In large part because he was concerned with preserving his own realm, right? So I think we see in the elves in the narrative a tendency towards stasis, right? The elves don't change much. We can see this physically if we look at the Turin and Doriath chapter, where it's talking about this companion of his youth, right? This elf maiden Nellis, right? In the years of his childhood in the kingdom of Doriath, Turin was watched over by the lion, though he saw her seldom. But there was a maiden named Nellis who lived in the woods, and at Malion's bidding she would follow Turin if he strayed in the forest, and often she met him there as it were by chance. Then they played together or walked hand in hand, for he grew swiftly, whereas she seemed no more than a maiden of his own age, and was so in heart for all her elven years. From Nellis, Turin learned much concerning the ways and the wild things of Doriath, and she taught him to speak the Sindarin tongue after the manner of the ancient realm, older and more courteous, and richer in beautiful words. Thus for a little while his mood was lightened, until he fell again under shadow, and that friendship passed like a morning of spring. For Nellis did not go to Menegroth, and was unwilling ever to walk under roofs of stone. So that as Turin's boyhood passed, and he turned his thoughts to deeds of men, he saw her less and less often, and at last called for her no more. But she watched over him still, though now she remained hidden. So the thing that ruins their friendship, right? That drives a wedge between them is that she remains as she always was, whereas he grows up. And as he grows up, he becomes concerned with different things, right? With deeds, not simply with walking and laughing and singing in the woodlands, right? She can remain forever a child, which seems to be what her nature more or less is, right? He cannot. Right? Turin has to grow up. And we even kind of see this in smaller ways with some of the other elvish characters, right? Where, Beleg, for example, won't give up trying to get Turin to go back to Doriath. And remains steadfast in his friendship to Turin no matter what Turin does, right? All right, we've already talked about Nellis as kind of unchanging. And I think there's a good kind of counterexample as well when we think about some of the outlaws that Turin takes up with, right? So the name that the band has taken for themselves is Garwaith, or Wolfmen, right? And this should recall the Norse Vargr, right, which is a word that means both wolf and outlaw. Right, it was applied to the kind of landless men who lived in the wilderness. But Turin tells Beleg, when Beleg wants him to leave the outlaws, where the hell is it? And now, of course, I can't find it. At any rate, he says to Beleg that as far as these men have fallen, they have good qualities and can be turned to good again, right? Now, if we look at this guy, one of the few named members of the band, Androge. When we first meet him on page 99, we're told, the hardest of heart was one named Androge, who had been hunted from Dorloman for the slaying of a woman. And Androge has a series of crimes chalked up in the demerit column, right, throughout the narrative here, right? One, right, he opposes Turin joining the band. Right, two, he's apparently assisting Forweg in rape at one point. Right, they're both chasing that young woman together. Three, he holds Beleg prisoner and tortures him. He kills Mim the dwarf's son, with a hastily shot arrow. And in general, constantly expresses suspicion of everyone and everything. So what would we how would we describe this character's nature given all of this that's chalked up against him?
Shifty.
Okay, well, no.
He's got this paranoia about him. I mean, I would too if I killed somebody's kid, kidnapped and tortured someone's friend,
Sure.
assisted in the rape of someone, and killed a woman. I would be looking over my shoulder constantly. I wouldn't trust anyone who came around.
Sure. So yeah, paranoia is sort of a keynote of the guy's character, right? But does this look to us like someone whom the narrative would allow to be redeemed in any way? Yeah, this looks like a villain, right? Like an unrepentant, vicious villain. So it's hard to see, at least initially, where Turin would see any good in this guy, right? And yet, he keeps kind of trusting Androge to be in charge when he's away, right? And then finally, when Mim the dwarf betrays the band to orcs, on page 149, Turin and Beleg retreated into the cave and rolled a great stone across the passage. In these straits, Androge revealed to them the hidden stair leading to the flat summit of Amon Rud, which he had found when lost in the caves, as has been told. Then Turin and Beleg with many of their men went up by the stair and came out on the summit, surprising those few of the orcs who had already come there by the outer path and driving them over the edge. For a little while they held off the orcs climbing up the rock, but they had no shelter on the bare summit, and many were shot from below. Most valiant of these was Androge, who fell mortally wounded by an arrow at the head of the outside stair. And then Turin is captured. Beleg is left for dead in the keeping of the dwarf who wants revenge on him just for being an elf. But Mime and Beleg were not the only living beings on that stony height. Androge, though himself wounded to the death, crawled among the dead bodies towards them, and seizing a sword, he thrust it at the dwarf. Shrieking in fear, Mime ran to the brink of the cliff and disappeared. He fled down a steep and difficult goat's path that was known to him. But Androge, putting forth his last strength, cut through the wristbands and fetters that bound Beleg, and so released him. But dying, he said, "My hurts are too deep even for your healing." So, this character who we've kind of written off as a cynical and sadistic villain, right, actually dies heroically, saving the life of and cutting the bonds of a former enemy, right? So I think that what this is demonstrating here is that as opposed to elves, who are long-lived, have long memories, and are unchanging, right? That men are dynamic, right? Men can and do change. And the final words of this chapter, "My hurts are too deep even for your healing." In physical terms, yes, right? Androge is mortally wounded, he won't survive this. But we can see that in some sense, spiritually, he has been healed. Right? He has been kind of brought back from the brink of evil and despair, right? Through his association with Turin and with Beleg. I think that this is kind of like the key crux around which the narrative revolves. Like on the one hand, I think that fate and the idea of weird that we've noted is so powerful in many of Tolkien's other works is very much an operation here. But weird just kind of dictates certain elements of your path, or it dictates certain destination points. It doesn't necessarily dictate how you're going to get there, right? It's the old Nordic concept of weird suggests that, like, look, if you're fated to die in a particular battle, right, you're going to die whether you fight or run away. So if running away isn't going to save you, you might as well fight, and you might as well face up to it and do the best you can. So, what else did you guys notice going on in this novel? Like, what else do you want to talk about or ask about? There's plenty to do here, but
How about Hurin? Yeah, he's kidnapped and, he's given a fate worse than death.
yeah, let's talk about what happens to Hurin. Like, what is Hurin's punishment?
He's forced to watch his family suffer. His
Yeah.
family and his people.
Yeah, he's cursed to be a bystander, right? Right, especially for, this quick-tempered, fiery, hasty warrior, right? It seems like the worst thing that could happen to somebody like this is to be cursed only to watch, right? And if we look at the way this is framed, right? Page 65. You shall see and you shall confess that I do not lie, said Morgoth. And taking Hurin back to Angband, he set him in a chair of stone upon a high place of Thangorodrim, from which he could see afar the land of Hithlum in the west and the lands of Beleriand in the south. There he was bound by the power of Morgoth, and Morgoth, standing beside him, cursed him again and set his power upon him, so that he could not move from that place nor die until Morgoth should release him. Sit now there, said Morgoth, and look out upon the lands where evil and despair shall come upon those whom you have delivered to me. For you have dared to mock me, and have questioned the power of Melkor, master of the fates of Arda. Right? Note that Morgoth never calls himself Morgoth, right? He is still Melkor, he who comes in glory, not Morgoth, the black enemy. Therefore, with my eyes you shall see, and with my ears you shall hear, and nothing shall be hidden from you. So let's look at this last sentence and try to parse this, right? Therefore, with my eyes you shall see, and with my ears you shall hear, and nothing shall be hidden from you. What does this mean?
Everything that I see and hear, you shall see and hear as well.
Yeah. And what is he suggesting about his own vision and hearing then?
It's far-fetching. He can see and hear everything.
Yeah, he's making a claim for his own omniscience, right?
Isn't Morgoth kind of, and this might be reading into it, isn't he the equivalent of like a fallen god?
Yeah, in Tolkien's broader conception of the mythology, yeah, Melkor is originally the mightiest of the Valar, who are basically like really powerful angels, and Eru Ilúvatar is the creator who made everything. The way the creation is depicted, Eru Ilúvatar directs all of the Valar and the minor god angel spirits called the Maiar in song. And Melkor tries to introduce his own strains and his own notes into the song, right, rebelling against the larger design, and so thus creates discord and disharmony. And because he persists in the creation of discord and disharmony, he falls. But he gives us also some interesting clues as to his own philosophy, and a kind of philosophy that I think animates the behavior of the men in particular in the novel, which we'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, therefore with my eyes you shall see, and with my ears you shall hear, and nothing shall be hidden from you. So he's making a claim for his own omniscience, right? But also, this means that Hurin is going to get a very kind of filtered perspective nonetheless, right? He's going to see and hear with Morgoth's eyes and ears. So he's going to see and hear things as Morgoth does, placing himself in a weird position of sympathy, right, with, like, not just his own enemy, but the enemy of all mankind, right? You will see things as the greatest evil in the universe sees them. And I think the whole seed of stone thing is also kind of important. So he's occupying until Morgoth sees fit to let him go a seat of stone on a mountain. What's waiting for him unfinished when he gets back home? If he ever gets back home.
I'm gonna be honest, I have no idea.
Easterlings?
What's that?
Easterlings?
Well, there's something that's made for him as he leaves. But he won't get to enjoy it. The servant Sador, whom Hurin calls Labadal or Hoppafoot, has made for him a wooden chair, right? For him to rule his kingdom from, right? So he's making a seat for his lord, but that seat will never be occupied, right? So the seat of stone on the mountain is meant to be opposed to the empty chair of wood at home, right? And again, stone and wood, this idea of the permanent or the static versus the changing and the dynamic is expressed in this dichotomy, right? But I do want to get into this conversation that Hurin and Morgoth have with each other as well. I want to start on page 63. After Morgoth has cursed Hurin. Right. But Hurin said, "You speak in vain, for you cannot see them nor govern them from afar, not while you keep this shape, and desire still to be a king visible on earth." Then Morgoth turned upon Hurin, and he said, "Fool, little among men, and they are the least of all that speak. Have you seen the valor or measured the power of Manwë and Varda? Do you know the reach of their thought? Do you think perhaps that their thought is upon you, and that they may shield you from afar?" "I know not," said Hurin. "Yet so it might be, if they willed. For the elder king shall not be dethroned while Arda endures." "You say it," said Morgoth. "I am the elder king, Melkor, first and mightiest of all the valor, who was before the world and made it. The shadow of my purpose lies upon Arda, and all that is in it bends slowly and surely to my will. But upon all whom you love, my thought shall weigh as a cloud of doom, and shall bring them down into darkness and despair. Wherever they go, evil shall arise. Whenever they speak, their words shall bring ill counsel. Whatsoever they do shall turn against them. They shall die without hope, cursing both life and death." But Hurin answered, "Do you forget to whom you speak? Such things you spoke long ago to our fathers, but we escaped from your shadow. And now we have knowledge of you, for we have looked on the faces that have seen the light, and heard the voices that have spoken with Manwë. Before Arda you were, but others also, and you did not make it. Neither are you the most mighty, for you have spent your strength upon yourself and wasted it in your own emptiness. No more are you now than an escaped thrall of the valor, and their chain still awaits you. You have learned the lessons of your masters by rote," said Morgoth, "but such childish lore will not help you. Now they are all fled away." "This last then will I say to you, thrall Morgoth," said Hurin, "and it comes not from the lore of the Eldar, but is put into my heart in this hour. You are not the lord of men, and shall not be, though all Arda and Menel fall in your dominion. Beyond the circles of the world you shall not pursue those who refuse you. Beyond the circles of the world I will not pursue them, said Morgoth, for beyond the circles of the world there is nothing. But within them they shall not escape me until they enter into nothing. So we can see two conflicting worldviews, actually, in this back and forth, right? What claims is Hurin making about the valor and the nature of the universe? What does Hurin seem to believe?
That no matter what, good will triumph.
Okay, so he seems to
Yes,
believe.
you might have been here when
Mhm.
the Valor and Arnor were here, but you're just a thrall.
Okay, so
You're not as powerful as you say they are. They are the more powerful.
Okay, yeah, so he does seem to believe, yeah, that good is more powerful than evil, right? What else does he seem to believe?
That no matter how much Morgoth tries, he'll never be the king of men. That
Okay.
he's wasted his power on
Mhm.
making himself look more fierce.
Okay, yeah.
And actually trying to do something.
Okay, power spent on the self is wasted. And does he seem to believe that there is anything beyond this, beyond his own world? Here. Yeah, he does argue for the existence of a world beyond, right? Now, what about Morgoth?
There's not a world beyond the current world. There's nothing.
Yeah, Morgoth's argument is one of kind of total materialism, right? There is only this world. Of which he claims to be master. There is only this world, and he claims to be the most powerful thing in it, right? Now, at least on that second count, does he seem necessarily to be wrong?
No.
Yeah, as far as we can see, he is the most powerful single being in this world, right? And why is it easy for him to make the case that this world does belong to him?
Because no one else has tried to take it from him.
Yeah. These other spirits that Hurin claims belief in, right, are absent. They are over on the other side of the sea, right? And do not intervene. And this is going to end up informing Turin's worldview over the course of the rest of the novel, right? This is why I point this out. That Turin's worldview is going to start becoming more like Morgoth's, right? That there is no help coming from across the sea. So all we can do is rely on ourselves. And indeed, I think this also plays into Turin's attitudes towards time. Right? There is a point at which he says, I will go only forward, I will not go back. If we look at page 118, when Beleg is trying to get him to go back to, it's like, don't even come back to Doriath with me, just come to the borders, right? the marches that we used to defend. He says, "Nay, I will not walk backward in life." Right? He intends only to go forward. So, what this often means, I think, is that Turin rarely considers past history in his actions, unless he's motivated by a grudge. And even his grudges often seem to be grudges of the moment, right? Let's look, for example, at his behavior towards Saros. So what happens in the episode that gets Turin banished in the first place? What happens with this elf Saros?
You accidentally killed him.
Yeah, Turin accidentally causes Saros' death, right? And I think it's important to note here exactly how this happens as well. So Saros at first comes off as one of these just kind of like standard kind of insulter figures who's close to the king, right? Like somebody like Unferth is in Beowulf. Although Unferth ends up, changing his tune and proving his own value after Beowulf defeats Grendel, right? But Saros simply hates, he hates Turin in part because he hates men, right? Now, what's the insult? I think this is actually important. The insult that drives Turin over the edge with Saros.
He calls him a wood moose.
Oh, even before that, what causes Turin to toss the cup in his face and break his mouth? Look on page 87, right? Turin said nothing, but turned his eyes upon Saros, and there was a glint in their darkness.
I was about to say that one, but I was trying to read off the
Yep.
If the men of Hithlum are so wild and fell, of what sort are the women of that land? Do they run like the deer clad only in their hair?
Mm-hmm.
Then Turin took up a drinking vessel and cast it in Saros' face, and he fell backward with great hurt. And Turin drew his sword and would have run at him, but Babla restrained him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's an insult to the women of Turin's country that drives Turin over the edge with Saros. And then, when Saros attacks Turin in the woods the following morning, right? In the morning he waylaid Turin as he set off early from Menegroth, intending to go back to the marches. Turin had gone only a little way when Saros ran out upon him from behind with drawn sword and shield unarmed. But Turin, trained in the wilds of wariness, saw him from the corner of his eye, and leaping aside, he drew swiftly and turned upon his foe. "Morwen," he cried, "now your mocker shall pay for his scorn." So, the insults to himself he ignores, right? But what's the insult he can't let go?
The women,
More specifically,
his mother.
yeah, the insult to his mother, right? That is too much, right? That is a bridge too far. And then once he has defeated Saros, what does he do to him?
Starts teasing him.
Yeah.
It's worse. I mean, it's worse than that, right? What does he force Saros to do?
He makes him strip.
Yeah.
And he set the point of the sword in Saros' buttock. And
Yeah.
chased him.
So there are a couple of things going on here, right? So like not only does he humiliate Saros, right? But he's doing so in a way that references Saros' own insults. And really, like also thus feminizes Saros, right? So this is not just humiliation, yeah, this is emasculation, right? He forces Saros to imitate what Saros said in his insult is the behavior of the women of Turin's country, right? And then in forcing Saros over the cliff, drives him to his death. So this shows us a couple of things about Turin. Like one, you know, this pursuit of grudges, right? He can certainly remember things that people did to him that were unpleasant, right? But then when Beleg tries to remind him of Nellis, and when telling him about the good turn Nellis did him in Doriath while he was gone, right? He's like, I have no memory of her. Right? Even though he spent half his childhood with her, right? But he can absolutely remember to the smallest detail things people have done that have wronged him, right? And in fact, what's the name he like? If we look at the name he adopts among the outlaws, he calls himself Nathan the Wronged. And this renaming, this changing of identities, is also a pretty important pattern in the overall narrative, so we'll talk more about that next time. But for now, yeah, I think we've only really seen this particular change in Turin. So like this, and I think he adopts the name Gorthol the Dread Helm as well, when he gets the dragon helm back. But yeah, he adopts new names whenever he is taking on a new identity or is kind of like inducted into some kind of new group, right? Now, at the time he adopts the name Nathan, he believes he has been wrongly exiled from Doriath. At the time that he adopts the name Gorthol, meanwhile, he has taken on his inheritance, the dragon helm of his fathers, and is starting to form a little army that he seems to think can be the basis for a kingdom in exile, right? So the name that he chooses is always a direct reference to his self-perception, right? At the moment that he takes the name. And this, I think, is actually kind of one of the important things going on here, is that these are names he chooses for himself. Right? Oftentimes, these kinds of renaming processes in narrative are like a name is imposed on someone by someone else, right? Turin chooses his own names. He takes them for himself. Now, there is one more thing that I really did want to discuss here. And that is the role, much larger in this text than we've seen in others, of... Oh, actually, let's sit on that for a minute. There was actually one more thing I wanted to do. We're kind of still on this like naming and taking things for himself thing. As a kind of form of rebellion. What is Thingol's relationship to Turin? What does he call himself, or what does he indicate by taking Turin on his knee when Turin comes to Doriath? So page 76, right? Thus Turin came over to the great bridge over the Esgalduin, and passed the gates of Thingol's halls, and as a child he gazed upon the marvels of Morgoth, which no mortal man had before seen save Beren only. Then Gethron spoke the message of Morwen before Thingol and the lion, and Thingol received them kindly, and set Turin on his knee in honor of Hurin, mightiest of men, and of Beren his kinsman. And those that saw this marveled, for it was a sign that Thingol took Turin as his foster son. And that was not at that time done by kings, nor ever again by elf lord to a man. So Thingol indicates by taking Turin on his knee a kind of parent-child relationship. We see that Nellis, even after Turin is an adult and is out of her care, continues to watch him in the woods. And Beleg, on page 177, after he has failed to convince Turin to come back to Doriath, says, "Alas," said Beleg, "but as a fond father who grants his son's desire against his own foresight, I yield to your will. At your asking, I will stay." So, what's this adding up to here? This pattern in elvish behavior with men. How do elves seem to see themselves in relation to men?
As the elder of them, as the parent.
Yeah.
guardian.
As the parent or the big brother all the time, right? So even in these, friendly and loving relationships between human beings and elves, right, there's always a somewhat paternalistic element. Right? That men are wayward little brothers and sisters who need to be watched, right? Who need to be taken care of, who need to be properly raised. And I think that some of Turin's resistance to returning to Doriath is a resistance of that kind of paternalistic relationship, right? He doesn't want to inherit Thingol's kingdom or Thingol's destiny, right? He wants to inherit from Hurin and Morwen, right? Hence taking on the dragon helm again. Right, very insistent upon his difference from the elves. Okay, last thing, and this is where we're going to leave it. One thing that we will note about this particular text is particularly for a heroic fantasy novel, a higher than average number of characters who are disabled. Have we already noticed there seems to be a lot of that? People who are disabled or unable to fight? And there's a particular edge to this that I think might in some way be related, that other scholars have suggested is somehow related to war experience in Britain in the First World War, right? So we have, right, Sador / Labadal, or Hobblefoot. This servant whom Turin loves, but who is held in little respect by the family because of his injury. At one point, Morwen says that, one who hurt himself with his own tools is not to be trusted. We also have the maiming of this elvish captive Gelmir at the Battle of Unnumbered Tears. Right, the orcs bring him back as part of a prisoner exchange, and then instead of letting him go, they cut off all of his limbs. And Gelmir's brother, Windor, who was captured in that same battle and is now maimed and one-handed after several years of slaving away in Morgoth's mines, right? And the number of disabled characters is not going to be limited to these three either, right? There will be more in the second half of the narrative. So, part of what is going on here, arguably, is this notion of what's called, particularly in Sador, he's the character that's been most drawn out at this point, so we'll focus on him. In Sador is this notion of the malingerer. The guy who isn't brave enough or patriotic enough to join up and go fight, but gets sick or injures himself in order to remain at home as a non-combatant. This was fairly common during the First World War. This was a common accusation during the First World War, right? Tolkien himself was actually fairly late to sign up for service, in large part because, well, one, he admitted himself that he lacked the physical courage. He did not want to go someplace where he was likely to be shot. He spent most of his time in service on the home front, in large part due to disorders that were largely invisible but nonetheless real, right? So he got trench fever, which got sent him home in the first place from being bitten by lice. Shell shock or PTSD also kept a lot of people out of action. Now, because you couldn't see anything wrong with those people, publicly they were often, kind of shamed, mocked, and humiliated. But I think there's a great deal of sympathy here for characters like Sador, whom Turin clearly loves and respects greatly, despite the fact that he is unable to fight. And despite the fact that the family holds him in little account, right? So I want you to pay attention to this particular theme and to the way the narrative deals with these maimed or disabled characters throughout. We're going to see a lot more of Gwyndor in the next couple of chapters, and there will be in the Forest of Brethil towards the end of this another character, the leader of the men in the forest, who is also disabled. So we'll see how all this plays out. All right, that is about all I have for you guys for today. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. So let me give you the reading questions for next time. We'll get our cleanup rags ready, and then you may go off into the dark and unpleasant afternoon.
I don't mind this, but if there was like some rain, I could tolerate it even more.
Yeah, see,